I'd say one of the top reasons men do come to see me is they're having a really difficult time communicating their feelings or even identifying them.
I never saw my dad cry until my one grandpa was in the hospital. He was basically like on his deathbed. Everybody around me was very emotional. I was like, I'm good. The one time my dad came out of the room and I saw like he had tears in his eyes. Oh, it's okay to be sad. And then it was like, I started crying.
What am I cutting off right now? What am I not acknowledging? What am I avoiding or distracting with right now? Emotions are like waves. They're going to build and build and build and build. They're going to hit their peak and you will come down. So I do get a lot of partners coming in wishing their partners would engage in the change, but they're not wanting to.
Yeah.
So then it becomes about radical acceptance from dialectical behavior therapy. So it's really hard for a lot of people to express their needs. It requires vulnerability.
If you've really opened yourself up and been vulnerable and put yourself in a vulnerable position, that's what trust is. That's what creating a safe space is for somebody. Like you're taking a chance on somebody, that's the trust. And then you're learning through that trust where that relationship goes.
Challenging that belief, challenging those thoughts, learning to catch them. It really requires a lot of self-awareness, a lot of checking in with your thoughts around what are you actually doing and what are you trying to accomplish right now.
All right, Wellness Ninjas, welcome back to another episode of the Wellness Dojo podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Craik, and really excited today to have a very special guest, Melanie Taylor, a local therapist here in Calgary. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm excited. Yeah. I'm excited to talk. We're going to riff on like just all things life, relationships, mental health.
Mental health.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my go-to. So I'm more than happy to have that conversation.
Amazing. So I got to ask, is this your first podcast that you've ever done?
It's my very first podcast.
I love that.
Yeah, you're my first.
I love that. I love when it's I love like being like the virgin podcast.
Yeah, you're people. The virgin podcast for sure.
Amazing.
And I haven't been on camera a lot, so this is interesting.
Okay.
For me.
Are you nervous right now?
I'm very nervous.
Okay. Yeah. It doesn't show. You're not showing it.
Oh, good. I'm
yeah.
glad I'm
confidence. I always say fake it till you make it. That's what
totally.
I'll tell my Kung Fu students, I'm like, you just got to go up there. Even if you're like so nervous, you just fake it till you make it. And eventually that confidence will start to shine through. So,
absolutely. I agree with that advice.
Yeah. So you're doing great.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay. So I'm always fascinated when I'm talking to whether it's coaches, artists, therapists, like what pulled you in towards that career. So like, I'm just kind of curious about your journey, your path towards that and kind of where you started and how you got to this career path.
Okay, I will give a summary because there's a lot. But my background is social work. So I have my master's in social work. I knew I wanted to be a social worker very early on, mostly because of some family dynamics in my immediate family. I have a sister that's developmentally delayed. I have another sister with a serious and chronic mental illness. And just having to navigate the systems and supports for them, I was like, I want to be a part of that. There's room for growth and change in that area for sure. So I did it. I went to school and worked at the same time and built some experience. From there, I was like, it's not enough to be on the front lines and getting my hands dirty. I want to be the person that people go to actually heal. So I was like, I want to be a therapist. So I quickly charted my path and was meticulous in where I chose to work and the experience I wanted to gain. And I knew I wanted to specialize in mental health, just given my personal experiences with my sister. And so that's where I aimed. I tried working with youth for a little bit, a little too close for me in terms of taking it home.
Yeah, I can imagine that'd be tough.
It's hard working with kids and youth.
Yeah.
Yeah. And adults are very fascinating to me because they often want to engage in change. They just don't know how.
Yeah.
So I love working with adults. I love working in mental health. And that's where I've been working as a therapist now for roughly 3 years.
I find I imagine even working with adults, like you kind of sometimes feel like you're working with youth. it's like you're bringing up like all the old stuff from the past. It's like, oh, we're talking to childhood you today.
Exactly. Yeah. The inner child.
Yeah. And shout out to all the people who do work with youth. Cause like you said, that's heavy. a lot of times.
I can't do it. I've tried, and I have friends that still work with youth, and I'm just like blown away by them. Like, such phenomenal work, such phenomenal resiliency, and like just amazing.
Yeah. So social work and then therapy, I imagine kind of more social work is more in the realm of like crisis.
Yes.
Right. And so I imagine that's pretty heavy just in general.
Yes.
And then you kind of mentioned like that being kind of like the front lines of like that crisis mode. Do you view therapy more as like a preventative measure for a lot of people? I know everybody's case is different, but is that kind of like where you get to kind of help people lay the groundwork?
Absolutely. I would say you can't really get to the nitty gritty of it while in crisis. So either if you can get to it before it turns into a crisis, obviously that would be ideal. And then my job before was deal with the crisis so that I could refer them to a therapist to learn how to kind of work themselves out of crisis, regulate themselves, get the resources they need, and work on what's really going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it sounds like a little bit more like relationship building in terms of like client therapist relationship as well versus social work being more like problem solving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're kind of always at a 10 when you're doing the frontline work because everything is a crisis.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everybody needs things now.
Yeah.
And there's a lack of resources, as many know. So I really wanted to be a part of the healing. That was where I needed to be.
Nice.
Yeah.
You mentioned you were going to school, you were working at the same time. Can I ask, like, what were you doing for work while you were going to school?
Yeah, I started out, well, I was a server for many years. So I started just doing serving and then doing school. And then once I finished my first year of my social work diploma, I got into social work right away. One of my first jobs was at a youth group home. And I did that for close to 2 years and went to school. I did that.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
That must have been tough though.
It was hard. It's been a long journey.
Yeah.
But I've always worked and gone to school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
Love the grind.
Yeah.
So now that you've been working, like, what are some of the things that you're enjoying the most about therapy work?
Oh, there's so much. I really, truly feel like I'm blessed to do what I do. The aha moments, I call them, those aha, that's why that's happening, or aha, that's why I do that, or like those big realizations. And when they're connecting the dots, there's nothing like that feeling where you get to be a part of that. You get to help them connect the dots. But then you also get to offer them like solutions and healing. When clients come back and they're starting to feel better and they don't necessarily need to see you as often, or when they come back and they're even giving you feedback, like, I feel a lot better, I'm, doing really positive things. Like there's nothing better than knowing you were a part of someone's journey.
Yeah. It's really empowering.
It is.
Yeah. It's really empowering to have somebody, you don't necessarily need like the thank yous or like the, hey, you really helped me and that kind of thing. But even just being able to see somebody, because like I'm talking from the perspective of a coach and somebody who's experienced in coaching. But I imagine you feel the same way, as like you're really invested in people.
Yes.
As much as they're invested in you. Sometimes maybe even more. I've noticed as a coach, like, but it's super rewarding to see that. But yeah.
It is. And yeah, it's a wonderful feeling. And I just know that it's impactful for people. And because I'm in private practice, people are there for a reason. They're there because they choose to be. They are looking for the help. They are looking for the strategies. They are looking for the healing. So that process looks very different. I've worked in agencies as a therapist, where it was free therapy and they were referred and those sorts of things. And it's just a totally different dynamic.
Yeah.
So I'm really blessed to have people that are there for a reason and want to use and utilize the time as much as possible.
Yeah. And I've talked to people before too, and we've had this conversation that one really unique thing about somebody who decides to go to therapy is they've kind of like overcome that hurdle on their own, and they're kind of making that decision to show up with intention.
Yep.
Right. And that's a really, like, it's a much easier thing to work with as well, because I mean, not always, but You have people coming in, they're like, they want to be there. They've kind of made the decision that I'm here, I'm going to do the work.
Yeah.
Again, not everybody shows up that way to therapy immediately, but I imagine that's a nice part of it too, is like versus like kind of crisis mode.
Yeah.
Is a little bit nicer to have people come in and be like, okay, I'm here to work on myself.
It is.
Yeah.
I love that. And I'm a big believer in personal growth and development and engaging in the change process on an ongoing basis. So it's nice to be surrounded by people like that every day, all day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know that you're somebody who's also very passionate about like men's mental health in particular.
Yes, that's where I've decided I want to spend some focus and time on. It's been something that's been on my mind for probably since I started out.
Yeah, and I know we've had some conversations in the past about men's mental health in general. Mm-hmm. I'm curious, like what pulled you towards men's mental health to begin with?
Oh, that's complicated.
It's a complex question.
It's a complex question. I really think there's 3 reasons. I've been thinking a lot about it. And the first reason, I love my dad dearly, and I love my brothers dearly, but I was raised in a household with very challenging males that really struggled with emotions, really struggled with having feelings, and I saw how it affected them, and I saw how it affected us. We weren't as close. We weren't able to connect in deeper ways, and that had an impact on me in adulthood. And then that led to me thinking those were normal things, and ending up in a series of relationships with emotionally unwell men that led to my ex-husband, and then we had some kids, ended up in a divorce, unfortunately, but just coming to that realization of like, well, this is a pattern based on the men that I've been exposed to, and based on this real lack of space and caring even for men's mental health. We have a lot of programs and services for women. We're always encouraging women to do these things, but I don't hear a lot of voices about men. And then what kind of built on that was I had a son. He's 11 years old. And as hard as I've tried to teach him about emotions and expressing them in positive ways, and I've really tried to do that, I just feel like there's so many societal factors that I'm fighting against. Mm-hmm. So I want to get my hands dirty and start fighting against the societal pressures, the societal norms around what it means to be a man and what it means to be a boy. Because it breaks my heart seeing him come home and fighting, crying, because I'm like, just cry, but he's like, no, I don't need to, I'm fine. But I can see it in his face. I'm like, where did this come from? I've certainly never raised you this way, but it's from other people, society. They pick up on those norms and those kind of rules of what it's like to be a man. So that really hit home with me too.
Yeah.
And then the third factor, if you can grace me some space to talk about feminism, I am a feminist. And I learned very early on in one of my classes that the statistics on males in violence in general is alarmingly high. Suicide rates for men are alarmingly high. And if we want to see a shift in women's issues, we need to start with men and boys. How we raise them, how we teach them to express, how we teach them to treat other people, and how they deal with anger. And that's where it all kind of really starts. Yeah. And I believe that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because we can't fix any one problem from one side only. No. Right? The same way that like men need to have a better understanding of women in order to, make those relationships better, to make the societal changes happen. Yeah. Women also need to understand men in that same way. Totally. And men need to understand men, and women need to understand women. It's like it needs to be this kind of holistic approach.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah. And I don't feel like it's very holistic right now. I feel like we're getting to a place where it's more of a general topic. It's murky. It's murky.
Very murky right now.
And it feels it's unfortunate I even have to say that I specialize in men's mental health. It should just be I specialize in mental health, and that should be enough to have men feel welcome and feel comfortable sharing and doing those things. But I'm sending the signal up. Men's mental health. I think it's important. It's one of my passions, and I'm more than happy to create that space.
Yeah. So I want to backtrack a little bit. So you mentioned kind of growing up around men. It sounded like men who were, very guarded, very hard to experience stuff. Yes. Can we talk a little bit about that and like maybe what your experience was from your side of it and seeing that, and just kind of what some of the things that you were seeing that you now know to be kind of red flags?
Absolutely. So I guess there's no way to sugarcoat it. My father was very traditional, and I would say very sexist. So very traditional gender norms, very traditional. Women are barefoot pregnant in the kitchen. Mm-hmm. Men are the breadwinners. There's no point in really trying to go to post-secondary or trying to have a career of my own, because that's not my role. So that was very prevalent. Mm-hmm. And I know, it was really difficult to express emotion because they didn't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
They'd be like, go to your room. I don't want to see you crying. Or, oh, don't be such a baby. So there was a lot of that messaging around how to deal with and regulate emotion. And having emotion was seen as a very negative thing. Like, I was often called a bitch, told I was being bratty, told I was being dramatic. Instead of providing the nurturance and comfort around those emotions, it was it was labeled as very negative and bad even. Mm-hmm. So those are my red flags now, like in terms of when I meet someone that I'm potentially, maybe want to have a relationship with or even a friendship with, is how do they understand emotion?
Yeah.
Is it, well, sometimes women just get bitchy, or she's very bossy, or these labels that we attach to emotions. I'm very cautious of that. Mm-hmm. That's usually a pretty big red flag to me.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I think a lot of men think that they're doing the right things.
Yeah.
Like that old traditional mindset. Like, I've met people in my life like that too. I've had male figures in my life as well who were very cut and dry. Like, this is what it means to be a man. Whether you have a daughter or a son, it's like you're treated the same way. It's like, no, you need the discipline. You need to be tough for this world. Yeah. The world is tough. So you need to, you can't let it push you around, like those kind of mentalities. And it becomes very, very easy and ingrained, like you mentioned, with even seeing in your son now. Yeah. Right. Like, I've even noticed that in myself, where it's like, yeah, you should be expressing your emotion here, but no, it just feels more normal. It feels more right to mm-hmm. just shut it out, to just deflect it, right? And those types of things, it's just easier. It's no, I'm good.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. I hear that a lot in session with men. I'd say one of the top reasons men do come to see me is they're having a really difficult time communicating their feelings or even identifying them.
Yeah.
They're like, I don't know. I just cut them off. I don't even have them. I'm like, well, you have them, but you're expressing them in probably some maladaptive ways.
Yeah.
Like substance use, mental illness, gambling, all these other things that we see pop up. It is an expression of emotion. It's just maladaptive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough. And I think you hit the nail on the head too. I think a lot of men just don't understand, they don't understand how to do it. Yeah. Right. But then there's also a little bit of stigma as well, because we do have those figures that have been passed down and stuff. For example, I remember I never saw my dad cry until my one grandpa was in the hospital. He was basically on his deathbed. And I remember I felt weird because I was I should be sad right now. Yeah. But I don't feel sad. Mm-hmm. I didn't everybody around me was very emotional mm-hmm. and crying and stuff like that. And I was just I was I'm good. Mm-hmm. Right. And then I remember the one time my dad came out of the room and I saw he had tears in his eyes. And it was almost as if my subconscious mind was oh, it's okay to be sad. And then it was I started crying. Yeah. Right. And it's a very, very interesting thing. And I think that's why it's so powerful for, men to share as well. Yeah. Right. And to create those spaces I know you're creating where, men can actually come together and see each other, that it's okay to Absolutely. Be vulnerable. It's okay to, mm-hmm. To express yourself. Yeah. Yeah.
And it just really kind of highlights the importance of role modeling, with anybody, that it's okay to feel. And it encourages others to feel when you feel. If you're in those scenarios where everyone else is emotional and you're not the emotional one, I would start to wonder, what am I cutting off right now?
Mm-hmm.
What am I not acknowledging? What am I avoiding or distracting with right now? That's where I usually start. Like, so tell me about a time when you were feeling really emotional, overwhelmed, anxious, any of those things, and how did you respond? Oh, I just made myself busy. I worked more. I went and did an oil change on my car. I went for beers with the guys. Like, there's always something that they're distracting with. Seldom is there like a check-in.
Yeah.
What's going on with me right now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny. I'm like, are you talking to me specifically right now? No. No, it's just such a tricky thing, right? And it's not just tricky for men. I want to say that too, because I know women in my life too who are very similar, who like have a very difficult time with it. Mm-hmm. But then you also notice that there probably were like you said, like male figures in their lives maybe that instilled that into them, right? But there's got to be a balance as well, I think. Yeah. Like, we can't also, like, I get caught in this tug of war myself, even personally, where I'm like, okay, am I being too vulnerable now? Like, or like, at what point do I actually need to just like toughen up and just, you know, get past this kind of thing? So I'm curious what your thoughts are on that in terms of, you know, I can't just sit and dwell in these emotions all the time. Mm-hmm. But I also don't want to just dismiss them and try and tough it out.
Right.
So where's the balance with that, do you think?
I think the balance with that is, well, first of all, dwelling is, this, you know, when you're doing like thought, when you have repetitive thinking and you're kind of in that loop, that's more leading down the path of anxiety. So we need to kind of treat that. But in terms of sitting with emotion, that's really the first step, is to actually sit with it. So don't go do an oil change on your car. Don't, you know, go clean the entire house. Because the thing about emotions, and I think a lot of people don't perceptualize it this way or understand it this way, is emotions are like waves. They're going to build and build and build and build. They're going to hit their peak and you will come down. Mm-hmm. So having faith in that process, like, I'm feeling really overwhelmed and really extreme right now, but I know I will come down. And then engaging in the process of how do you get yourself to come back down? Yeah. In a non-avoidant, distracting way. So if I'm feeling really emotional on a day, and I'm having tough things going on, I tend to just turn on a movie because it keeps something in the background. And I sit with it. This is how I'm feeling right now. It will end. And then I do some self-care to help bring myself down. So I'm acknowledging the emotion, and I'm processing it in more healthy ways. Yeah. And just sitting with it, which is really hard to do. Yeah. I want to acknowledge that. Yeah.
But that's a really powerful analogy. It's funny because it's the exact analogy that I use when I'm feeling anxious or depressed or even angry or like any of those types of things in my life. Like, when I'm feeling the feels, it's like I'll always just tell myself, okay, just ride the wave. Just ride the wave. Like, even when I'm feeling really good, like, I have to remind myself too, is like, this is going to come down. Like, like, life happens in waves. Totally. Right. And it's funny. I use it's the same thing with cravings. Like, when I'm working with clients with nutrition, I'll often use that exact same analogy with cravings. Is like, your cravings are going to come in waves, and it's going to, like, I don't know if you've ever, like, what's something that you like crave? Like, what's one of your...
Oh, like sour candies.
Oh, sour candies, yeah.
All the time.
Yeah. I'm the same. Yeah. I love me some candies. I like the non-sugar ones.
And what's the point of that?
I mean, if they're too sugary, they hurt my teeth.
Come on, Kyle.
Okay, well, we'll split them. Okay. We'll get a jar, we'll split them. I'll take the gummy ones, you take the sugary ones. Okay. But, okay, so let's imagine now you're thinking about those sugary candies, right? And it's like, you start to, like, even my mouth is salivating as we're talking about it, right? And so that kind of starts it, and then, like, the wave builds, and it's going to get to a point where you're like, man, I want them so freaking bad. Yeah. And then it's going to fade. Yeah. And I'll always tell clients, I'm like, just practice just sitting with the craving. Like, you sit down to watch TV and you want chips. Yeah. Right? It's like, sit with it. And just, like, let the, like, craving of chips, and it's like, let it see how high that craving gets, how strong that urge gets for whatever addiction it is or temptation it is that you have, and just sit with it. And you'll notice that it will eventually go away. Yep. And I think it's like what you said with emotions, it's so similar.
Oh, exactly the same. Yeah. And I think the reason people don't want to sit with it is, one, it's really uncomfortable. No one wants to do something that causes them discomfort. But also there isn't that belief or knowledge that, I mean, it will come down. Yeah. There's no faith in that too, right? It's scary. It's like, am I going to feel like this all day? Like, am I going to feel like this all month? Like, when is this going to go away? It's uncomfortable. It's giving me anxiety. It's doing all these things. But it will go away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have faith, people.
Have faith, people.
Yeah.
Sit with it.
Sit with it. Yeah.
Don't push it away.
So you mentioned, like, okay, so you sit with it, and then you said you do a little bit of self-care. So let's talk a little bit about self-care, and, like, first of all, what does that look like for you?
So I really hate the term self-care just because I feel like people think it's like going to yoga and
like
having a bath. Yeah. So for me, self-care is engaging in activities or things that fill my cup. So that add joy, add pleasure, add relaxation. And that can be anything. It doesn't have to be these big elaborate things that take hours to do. For me, honestly, and it works for me, making myself a cup of tea and giving myself 5 or 10 minutes just to sit there and drink it makes me feel good. The act of actually, because I make tea lattes, making the tea latte is very therapeutic to me. And then just sitting there and giving myself that time. I have kids, so sometimes that's what it looks like in a day. But I make sure I do it. For me also, like washing my face at the end of the day is a big one for me. I look forward to that because I mindfully do it. And we can talk more about mindfulness if you want, but I'm present in the moment with washing my face and doing my skincare routine and doing those types of things. I also practice yoga, hot yoga, and I engage in therapy as well. I think everyone should engage in therapy at some point. And a healthy therapist is one that engages in that process, in my opinion. Yeah. So I do that. In the summers, I like to cycle. And then I prioritize spending time with my family and friends. So in those tough moments when things are getting a little bit too much for me, I prioritize doing those things, and I make an active effort to make sure I'm doing it.
Yeah, and I like how you described like filling your cup. Yeah. Because it's easy, even as you're describing some of those things, I'm like, okay, I could see some of those things being like a distraction, right? Like I could see myself being like, I'm going to distract myself with this or that. But I think that's the difference maker, right? Is like, is this filling my cup or not? Totally. You know, if I'm, just having a drink to take off the edge, is that really filling my cup? No. Right? Like if I'm, watching porn to feel good or something like, is that really like filling my cup? Do I really feel good afterwards? It's like, probably not. Right. Right. But like going and like taking that time to like take care of my body, that feels good afterwards. Taking that time to, sit down and relax, that feels good afterwards. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's an expression, right? It's an expression of emotion. And it helps you express positive emotions and takes away from the negativity that you might be feeling, right? So it fills your cup. Yeah. Do you do a lot of couples therapy? I do not. Okay. It's something that I've considered doing. Yeah. We have someone in our office that does, and she's lovely. But no, I just see individuals. Okay. Yeah. And when you're working with individuals, I imagine you do get people who come in and talk about their partners and stuff like that quite a bit. Yes. Because we kind of mentioned how, like, I think there's, like, it's not just men who struggle with coming in and opening themselves up. And, like, there's men like myself who, like, I'm an open book. Like, I love to go and talk about my problems. I love that. Not that I'm, like, super self-absorbed or anything. I don't think I am. It doesn't make you self-absorbed, Kyle. but like, I like to go and, like, work on myself. I like to look for the answers and to discover, like, how can I be a little bit better? Like, what did I do wrong here? Like, how could I have done this situation better? Yeah. Almost to, like, an OCD level, I think, sometimes. But I know women who aren't like that. But then I also know the opposite, where I know men who are like, no, I don't talk about my feelings and stuff. I imagine that becomes a bit of a dynamic in relationships quite often. Like, do you think that, like, do you see it a lot where maybe like one spouse comes in, they're like, oh, I want to work on the relationship, but my spouse doesn't want to work on it. Yes. Or I want to work on myself, but like what I hear a lot is like, I want to get into shape, but my spouse is holding me back. Like, they're not supporting me, like those types of things. Yeah, absolutely. It's
It's a tough one to balance as
Mm-hmm.
a therapist, because you don't want to align yourself too much with them, because it does take away some accountability and responsibility from them.
Yeah.
But you also want to be supportive if that partner is saying or doing some maladaptive or abusive things.
Mm-hmm.
So I do get a lot of partners coming in wishing their partners would engage in the change, but they're not wanting to.
Yeah.
So then the work just becomes around, well, what change do you need to see to make this successful in your eyes and on your side of the street? And if that is, sometimes it ends up being, I don't want to be with this partner anymore.
Yeah.
Then the support becomes around that. If this is an unmanageable situation and this person, my partner, is not going to change, but they want to stay, that's more difficult. Because sometimes I hear women that are in, or men, really in abusive situations with their partners.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of gaslighting and manipulation and all these things, and it's not going to change.
Mm-hmm.
So then it becomes about radical acceptance from dialectical behavior therapy. So how do we accept the things that are out of our control?
Yeah.
Which
Is that what you mean by radical acceptance? Yeah.
Yeah. You have to radically accept things that you don't necessarily want to,
Yeah.
but you don't have control over changing.
Yeah.
So you got to learn some radical acceptance skills.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think too, like, oftentimes it centers around you.
Yep.
Right. Again, kind of leaning back on my experience working with people, oftentimes it's like, I want to lose weight, but my spouse keeps bringing out chips every single night. Even though I've told them, like, I don't want to eat chips or I don't want to have that stuff around, they still go and they buy pizza or whatever the case might be. I often say, like, you can't force them to change with you.
No.
Right? All you can do is, like, understand yourself a little bit better,
Mm-hmm.
and start to make those changes for you. And then, oftentimes I find people find, like, that's where it's the analogy that I use a lot is like crabs in a bucket. Have you heard that analogy before?
No.
So there's stories of, like, crabs that, like, fishermen who have, like, they're fishing crabs, and so they put all the crabs in a bucket, and then, like, oftentimes, like, some of the crabs will try and get out of the bucket.
Mm-hmm.
But if you sit and watch, what you'll see is that the crabs actually will grab the crab that's trying to escape and pull it down back into the bucket, so it won't let it leave.
Okay.
And I'd see a lot of relationships that way.
Yeah.
Where it's like one person is, like, maybe trying to grow or maybe trying to better themselves,
Mm-hmm.
and that's scary for the other person.
Absolutely.
Right. And so it's that person's maybe not ready for that change. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that person's not ready to be healthy,
Mm-hmm.
or that person's not ready to dive into their self-growth and that type of thing.
Yeah.
And so it feels like separation is scary. So they just, like, no, you should have chips with me.
Yeah.
Right. No, come back to the good side.
Come back to
right?
the good side. Yeah.
I see that a lot. I'm curious if you kind of see that as well, in terms of even just, like, emotions and like trying to work on yourself.
Yeah, the first thing I want to say is just, I liked how you phrase that, because I'll often tell clients, you can't control other people. You can't control what they say you're going to do, but you can control your response. And you can control what you say or do. So I always try to put it back on them in terms of, you have control and power here within yourself. And it's up to you how you decide to do that. But yes, I do see that quite a bit. I think where I see it the most is in borderline to moderately abusive relationships, where I see people coming in that have had enough, but they don't want to leave because they're afraid of, being alone, being single, what that would look like for them. There's kids involved, like all those types of things, right?
Yeah, I think it's a really dynamic thing.
Yeah, sorry,
right?
the dynamic, yeah. So, yeah, I see that a lot where they start standing up to the abusers. The abuser's like, oh, geez, like, now I'm going to get called out on my behaviors. I'm going to have to make these changes. This is going to shift everything. So they up the ante, is what I call it. They're upping the ante to keep you down with them, to keep you in that role. It's pretty common, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And is there, like, what would be a good way, in your opinion, for people to find, like, a middle ground on, okay, I want to make this change, my partner doesn't, is there, like, a middle ground that people could find? Or is it just, I'm just going to focus on me and just do my thing and we'll see what happens?
No, like I certainly always encourage change talk or encourage change behaviors. So having difficult conversations with your partner around, and I always kind of give tips and tricks on how to have those conversations where you are sharing some vulnerability and you are sharing, these are the things that I'm trying, and voicing your needs. Like, what are your needs and wants? It's really hard for a lot of people to express their needs because it requires vulnerability. So there's usually a lot of work around vulnerability and being able to express value, worth, and needs.
Yeah.
And oftentimes partners, male or female, they don't even know that they're doing it.
Yeah.
So if you can approach it in a way that's not going to make them feel defensive, I think a lot of people will, like, there's not a lot of partners out there that are like, oh, I'm hurting you. Oh, I'm going to keep doing that, unless they're obviously maladaptive people. But generally speaking, the couples that I hear of and work with, the individuals in those couples, they'll come back to me and they'll be like, yeah, we had such a really good talk because he didn't even realize I was feeling that way. And I'm like, yeah. People are not mind readers, people.
Yeah.
Sometimes you really just need to be vulnerable, share, and ask for what you need. And so then that becomes the work in the relationship too, right? Kind of role modeling how you do this.
Yeah.
And encouraging that. And they change without even knowing they're changing.
Yeah. Yeah, and I feel like that also sets up a boundary. Like that almost sets up like I don't want to say a line in the sand, but essentially it can.
Yeah.
When you've fully communicated something, you really start to understand like somebody's willingness in that moment, right? If you've really opened yourself up and been vulnerable and put yourself in a vulnerable position, I think that's what trust is.
Totally.
In any kind of relationship, that's what trust is, right? Even in a therapist-client relationship, right? That's what creating a safe space is for somebody is, okay, you're taking a chance on somebody, that's the trust. And then you're learning through that trust whether or not, like, where that relationship goes. Yeah. Right? I've even had buddies where I'm like, I'll open up about something and like I just like don't feel good about the response that I got, or I felt like they weren't comfortable with me sharing or something like that. And it's like, okay, I now know that this friendship has this boundary here. Like, I'm not going to come to this person. Or like another good example is gossip. Like when you hear, like, even within your own family that like one person's gossiping to you about another person, I'm like, I don't want to open up anymore about that, because if gossip is the thing, like, I want to feel safe. I want to feel like I can come to you. Right. Yeah, it's interesting.
No, I like that. You're right. It is a way of drawing a boundary, and it is a way of learning about other people's intentions too, and what they value in the relationship and how they value you in the relationship. Yeah. And that's scary. I get it, but sometimes we need that information to move forward.
Yeah. Do you think that self-care is like a form of vulnerability?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's so many people I hear that are like, oh, I meant to do it, but I didn't have the time. I meant to do it, but I was busy at work. I meant to do it, but I couldn't think of anything to do. Because really what we're asking you to do is sit with it. When you do self-care, you're sitting with it, right? You're hopefully engaged in what you're doing. And there's a vulnerability piece to allow yourself to do that. And allow yourself to do it without guilt or shame for doing it. I hear that a lot. Oh, I felt so guilty, taking 5 minutes to do mindfulness because there's a million other things I could do. Yeah. Well, you're kind of important and your mental health is important. So 5 minutes is not a big ask for yourself. Yeah. And you need to allow yourself to take care of yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Guilt is such like a big one.
Oh yeah.
Right. And I think with men in particular as well, again, not disregarding women in any way, but I do hear that a lot with guys. I've done like men's retreats and stuff like that, and I think that's one of the number one things that comes up too. Is like, I want to take care of myself, and I want to give myself this time. Like, I know what I need to do. Yeah. But it's like I feel guilty taking time away from the kids, or taking time away from my spouse, or taking time away from my work because that's so important because I got to put food on the table. Like all these different demands in life that are pulling us all these different directions. And it's like the last thing that I can think about is taking care of myself, because I've got all these other fires I got to like continue to tend to.
Absolutely. And I think that is very common with men and women, but I see it more in men. There is this belief that they have to be productive all the time.
Yeah.
They have to be working on the house, working on the car, working on at work, at home with the kids, at home with the wife, and they need to be there present in that way. But at the end of the day, you know, I'm sure you've heard of the oxygen analogy. Like when they talk about on the plane, you put the oxygen mask on yourself first. If you're not putting on that oxygen mask, you're no good to anyone in any of those other roles. Yeah. So I hear that a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like the hero's mindset too that I think is so like prevalent in men. Is like we always want to be the hero. Like it's like oftentimes you hear it's like the man is the one that like wants to try and like just fix the situation and move on.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's like even me as a coach, like it's empowering for me to help people, and it's like hard to not carry that into every situation as well. Where you're like, can't worry about me because like it feels good. It's like almost feels like self-care for me to go and fix this problem over here. It feels like self-care for me to like help another client, to you know, make my kids feel good in that moment, to, you know, all those different things. But then it just like weighs down on you, and then you eventually get to a breaking point if you haven't taken that time.
Well, yeah, you haven't filled your cup.
Yeah.
You're taking out of your cup, and you're giving out of your cup, but you're not taking the time to fill it back up. Yeah. So then your cup runs dry.
Yeah.
And there's usually an incident.
Yeah. So what do we do as men to like not feel like the hero all the time, not feel like we have to be the person who serves everybody? Because I know that's probably the men that are listening to this right now. They're like, yeah, it's easier said than done, right? And it's like you just like feel that pull, as like that responsibility. I have to take care of everybody else. How do you guys start to flip that switch a little bit towards got to take care? I got to put my mask on first.
Yeah. Come see me. But also I think it's about challenging that belief, challenging those thoughts, learning to catch them. Okay, I'm engaging in some hero behavior right now, and this isn't helpful. Yeah. I need to do this instead. Yeah. So it really requires a lot of self-awareness, and a lot of checking in with your thoughts around what are you actually doing and what are you trying to accomplish right now. Yeah. And is it filling your cup? Yeah. If the answer is no, it's time to move on to something else. Yeah. But it's a process. It's not easy to do. It's so ingrained, I think, in men. We see it in everything, right? In movies, the man is always the rescuer. He's always the one saving the day. Like, it's so prevalent that it would take some time to really break that down. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's where therapy can be so helpful. Yeah. Because if you don't know where to start, start by just talking. Right? Yeah. Because then you have somebody else who can help you kind of like pull some of those things out. Yes. Like I go to therapy, and I know sometimes like I actually just recently had a conversation with my therapist where they're like, how did you feel afterwards? Like, what's your biggest takeaway from our conversation? Mm-hmm. And I was like, honestly, like it was just nice to talk in a space about things that I don't talk to anybody else in the world about. Yeah. I was like, literally nobody knows the things that I've talked to you about in my life. Like I'm the only person who knows these things. I said, and it just felt good to just talk about it. Yeah. Because I find when we're in our own heads all the time, and because first of all, I don't think people should have to like be vulnerable to everybody. I think you need to be, I like the expression of like vulnerability with boundaries. Totally. Like people often come up to me, they're like, why don't you talk to me about it more? Like, why don't you do this? I'm like, well, I have my safe spaces. Yeah. So like, I talk where I want to talk. Like I am working on it and stuff. It's just, I don't share it to like everybody on Facebook and all these different things. Right. Yeah. But having that person, like going back to my thoughts, sorry, I have a little bit of ADHD.
Hey, I've been doing it too. So
going back to my thoughts, like I do have those conversations where it's like, yeah, I just wanted to talk about it and not feel the pressure of like having to pick those things out myself. Yeah. Because I feel, maybe you feel this way too, but I get stuck in my head a lot. Yes. Where I'm like, there's this problem and this thing that's causing me anxiety and this thing that's making me upset and this thing that's making me happy. And it's like this big storm that's going on inside your head all the time, and trying to pick it out yourself is overwhelming.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Not even knowing where to start. Yeah. Right? Like the thing when people come to see me, they don't know why they're thinking the things they're feeling. Yeah. or thinking the things they're thinking. And a lot of the times they're those automatic thoughts. I call them the knee-jerk reactions that we don't have control over. They just pop into our heads.
Yeah. And
then the anxiety takes over and it just repeats that on repeat, right? And you just hear it over and over and over again, and it turns into a spiral. So that's where, you know, cognitive behavior therapy or CBT would come in. We would do some stuff around catching and changing thoughts.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's not an easy fix. None of this is an easy fix because it's so deeply ingrained.
Yeah.
But yeah, those automatic thoughts, those are what usually starts that whole process.
It's almost like therapy is like your filter. It's going to help. It's like filter it through a little bit. It's be like, okay, let's put that over here in this pile, that over here in this pile. And like, oh, that seems like a good place to start. Tell me more about that.
Yeah. Tell me more.
Yes. Yeah. Tell me more about how that makes you feel.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. If you had $1 for every time you had to say that.
I don't say that much.
No?
I find creative ways to find it so I don't sound so therapist-y.
Yeah.
Yeah, if that's a word.
Yeah, therapist-y. I like
therapist-y. Thank you.
Therapist-y. Yeah. Well, let's look at that patented.
Yeah, that's now my term.
Yeah. So you mentioned cognitive therapy or cognitive behavioral therapy.
Yes.
Wow, I can't talk. Can you talk about that a little bit to the listeners? Like describe what it is.
Yeah.
Some people have heard that before, I think, but they're not really sure what it is.
So cognitive behavior therapy, or CBT, is one of the most effective treatments for like anxiety, depression, and a number of other disorders. But what CBT says, and they reference a triangle, and at the top of the triangle, they say is thoughts. And those are the automatic thoughts that sometimes happen on a subconscious level. We don't even know they're informing us. And then those thoughts then trigger how you're feeling, and that impacts your mood, and that impacts how you're feeling on the day-to-day. And then that mood moves over to your behaviors. So your mood decides how you're going to behave. So oftentimes when people come to see me, they're stuck in this triangle with very negative thoughts or unhelpful thoughts, I call them. And that's causing anxiety. That's causing a low mood. So they're not engaging. They're isolating. They're having anxiety attacks. All these other maladaptive kind of symptoms are coming out. So what CBT says is if we can get a handle on those thoughts, and we can identify the automatic thoughts, and then we can start challenging them and offering up different thought patterns, then you'll start to feel better and you'll start behaving better. So that's really a very crash course in CBT.
Yeah.
But I hope that explains it enough to get an idea of what the goals are, and that is really around changing those automatic thoughts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool.
It is cool.
I think that's helpful for people as well. And do you find that like men or women struggle more with that, or is it just like unique to the individual from your experience? That's kind of a generalization question, but like even just like self-awareness in general, I'm curious, like do you find that men, just because we were talking about men's mental health, I'm curious if men maybe struggle more with that self-awareness piece of like taking a step back and like going inward a little bit? Oh
yeah, men struggle with that big time. Yeah, the self-awareness piece around where it's coming from is what they're honestly lacking the most. Like they understand that it's unhealthy. Like I'll have a lot of men come to me and say, I have a drinking problem and I know I shouldn't drink so much. But that's honestly how I've been coping. Yeah. But they don't understand what they're coping with or from, like what's causing you to feel that way. Yeah. So there's no awareness around that. They just struggle to connect the dots a little bit more, I think, because there isn't that internal process because they were never taught that. Yeah. It was just very keep going. Yeah. Be productive. Do good in school. Do good at work. Be a good father. Be a good husband. Like, so it just... A lot of be good. Be good. Yeah. Right? A lot of be good. Yeah. And just no awareness. Yeah. 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 I can speak to that a little bit just in my own life too. Like, I remember when I first got married, like my father-in-law, he had a farm, right? So he's very like hands-on stuff like that. And I grew up in the city. Yeah. Like I wasn't like that. And so I was like always trying to prove things, like more to myself really, but like externally, like to the other people around me, like kind of like prove like, oh, I can lift things. Oh, I can use tools. Like I can do that. And it's like, that's just one example of many examples in my life, but it's the same thing. Like you mentioned, like be a good father, right? Like that's something I'm super, super passionate about is like my kids and being a father and stuff like that. But when we're constantly focused on, I have to be good at this thing, right? For men and women,
But like when we're constantly putting ourselves under that pressure of like, I have to be good at this. Like I have to be a good dad. I have to be this. Then you're constantly comparing yourself to how you could be better.
Yeah.
Right. And that's a tough thing to walk through your entire life with, right?
Yeah. I call it the compare and despair.
I like it.
Yeah. Comparing leads to feeling despair around what you should and shouldn't be doing. And should and shouldn'ts are unhelpful thoughts.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So true.
Yeah.
So true. So before we run out of time, I want to hear about your men's group that you have going on, because I know you got something really exciting happening, and I'm excited to share about it because it's something I'm super passionate about as well. So can you tell us a little bit about your men's therapy group that's coming up?
Yeah, I came from, like I said, just experiencing years of recognizing that there isn't enough space for men to come together to learn about some important things, to share about their own experiences, and to get that kind of growth and development that they're looking for. There's just so many barriers to it. So I thought, I approached my my director, Alina, and was like, I have this idea for a men's group. And she was totally on board and supportive, and she thinks it's a great idea. So we ran with it. We are holding it starting January 16th, 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. every Tuesday. And the goal of the group is the first half will be based on topics that, I've heard through the support that I've already provided to males are important, like healthy relationships, how to identify and express emotion, trauma, mental health. Those are the 4 main topics. And then, so the first hour will be spent talking about those topics, giving information, sharing information. We'll take a small break. We'll come back, and then it'll be like an open floor. So let's share some experiences. What did this bring up for you? How can you relate to what was talked about? And I plan on sitting back that hour and just providing a safe space and mediating and making sure that people are connecting. But it's really for the men to come and talk about that. Yeah.
And it's something I was talking to you about before, is like, I'm so excited to see things like this happening, because men need a place where they can come in with the intention.
Yeah.
Because it's so hard to, like, I'm not going to go for drinks with my buddies and just like open up with like, hey, by the way, I've been struggling with this thing.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, let me just bring the mood down. This is how that makes me feel as the person being vulnerable. Right. So to have that space where you can go in and the intention is set of like, this is safe. This space is actually here for vulnerability. I think it does make it just so much easier. It kind of like removes this layer of stigma for men.
That's what I'm hoping. That's something that I definitely want to continue offering, and with different topics that I really would love to do one on divorce and separation, a support group for men around that. And just some other things that I've kind of come along the way. So we need people to register so that we can continue offering this safe space and can continue offering groups that are going to be helpful. Yeah.
And I know you do have limited spaces available.
We do.
Spaces are filling up already.
Yes.
How can the guys that are interested in this find you? How can they sign up?
So you just go to the website, www.exhale-psychology. .ca. I had to think about that.
Yeah, I know, right? I always put people on the spot. I was like, wait, how do I spell it even? Yeah.
Is it psychology? Yeah. So exhale-psychology.ca.
Cool. And we'll post a link in the show notes too, so people can find that easily. But
that'd be awesome. I really appreciate the support. We need more men out talking about these things.
Yeah, and what you mentioned too is like anytime I run something like this, even like I ran a men's retreat back in October, and like it was so amazing and stuff, but just leading up to it is like we need those guys who are willing to take that first step, who are willing to put themselves out there in order to create that space.
Absolutely.
Right? Because it's like there's the expression like build it and they will come, but like we need those leaders almost to step up and to show that we can fill those spaces. Yeah. Right. And so if you're a guy who's on the fence, you're like, I'm not sure if that's for me, like take a chance. And if you're not ready to do it for yourself, then do it just for men. Totally. Right. 'Cause I think that's so important is, there might be somebody, like, I guarantee you there's somebody else in that group who's also unsure. They're also like, I don't know if this is the right thing for me. Like come together and show each other that it's okay.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah.
And if you're unsure, you can always book a connection call with me, and I can give you more information. We can chat about what your goals for group might be, what you're kind of hoping to get out of it. It's a free call. It's 15 minutes. You can book it online, the same website. And I'm happy to share more and just kind of hear more about your story and what brings you to group, and we can talk it out.
Yeah. And not to be too sales pitchy here, but you mentioned that people can also be reimbursed for their benefits, right?
Absolutely. So I'm an MSW. So you would we provide receipts after each week, and you would just submit that through to insurance, and it's reimbursable.
Yeah, which is super, super cool.
Yeah.
It takes that stress, that financial stress barrier away.
Yeah.
It's just like, no, just show up and just be ready to start.
And I like to call it an investment. That's, the money is an investment in yourself.
Yeah.
And insurance will pay it back, hopefully. So.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the ROI is huge, right?
Yeah.
So
totally.
Is there anything that we haven't talked about on this episode that you feel is important?
I don't think so. I think we covered a lot of ground there, Kyle.
We did. We did cover a lot of ground.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me. This was great.
Yeah. Of course, it's my pleasure. I was thinking this is totally random, so you can shut me down if you want to. But I was thinking we could put each other on the spot a little bit in the realm of vulnerability and sharing. I was thinking we could shoot back and forth a couple like would you rathers.
Sure, let's do it.
Do you think you can come up with a couple? I'm trying to come up with some just on the spot right now, but I'll start.
Okay, you start.
And that'll give you time. Okay, so we'll just go rapid fire back and forth. We'll do like 4 or 5 each, maybe.
Okay.
Does that work for you?
Okay, I'm going to try. I don't know if I can come up with something that quick.
Okay. I think you're going to surprise yourself.
Okay.
You can do this.
Okay, I can do hard things.
This is like the reverse icebreaker that we're doing now.
Okay. I'm into it.
Okay, so I'm going to say we'll just say this or that. It doesn't have to be framed in would you rather, but so this or that, wine or beer?
Neither.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Mm-hmm. Do you not drink at all?
I drink very, very rarely.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Is that an option to say neither, or do I have to?
No, it's always an option. Yeah.
Okay. Would you rather snow or sun?
Sun.
Okay.
Yeah. Cal, would you rather cats or dogs?
Dogs. I don't like cats.
Me too.
No offense, cats.
I do like cats, but I like dogs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you rather amusement park or a spa?
Amusement park, which is like super like ironic because I own a wellness company, but yeah, I like adventure. Yeah. Okay. Would you rather Christmas, since it's the festive season, or Valentine's Day?
Christmas.
Yeah.
1000%.
That was an easy one.
Yeah.
One more each.
Okay. Would you rather skydive or scuba dive?
Ooh, skydive. Yeah.
Really?
Easy, yeah.
I'm terrified of heights.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that wouldn't happen. And I'm terrified of the ocean, so I don't know that I could do either of those.
I've been more terrified of the ocean because of the pressure, I think.
Yeah. And Kyle, they don't know what's down there.
I know.
That's what scares me.
I know. I think we know, like, I don't know this for sure, but I'm pretty sure we probably know more about, like, the vast universe than we do about our own underworld.
I read something that says we only know 5% of what's living in the ocean.
Yeah.
I ain't going down there.
How do they know it's 5% if we don't know what?
It's a good question.
Yeah.
Where does this come from?
Yeah. I heard that 99% of statistics are made up on the spot. So.
Yeah, I just made that up. No, I didn't. I actually read that.
I got to give you one more now. Okay. See, would you rather pizza or tacos?
Tacos.
Oh, wow. That was fast.
I love tacos.
I kind of like had that feeling when I said it. I was like, I think you're a taco person.
I am a taco person. I love tacos.
Yeah. I would be pizza. But I do love tacos.
Yeah.
It's like, it's really close.
It used to be close, but now having a son and my ex-husband was fanatical about pizza.
Oh, okay.
I am just done with pizza.
Yeah, you're done with pizza then. That makes sense then.
We ate it a lot.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I was going to say too. Tacos are more unique.
Yeah.
There's like pizza is like, I feel like we have it often.
Yeah.
Whereas tacos, like.
It's harder to find. And
is there a good taco place in Calgary that you like?
The only one that comes to mind that I like going to, and also just because it's downtown and I like going down there sometimes, is Aniho.
Okay.
Have you ever been to Aniho?
No,
downtown?
I have not.
It's really tasty. They make really good guacamole at the side of the table for you.
Okay.
It's delicious.
Okay.
Shout out to Aniho.
Yeah, shout out. have to tag them on Instagram
Yeah.
or something. Awesome. No, that was fun.
Thank you.
And I think we could, if you're up for it, I'd love to do it again sometime.
Yeah.
I think there's lots of different topics that we could dive into and talk about very easily. So yeah, thanks again for coming on the show. This was fun.
Thanks for having me, Kyle. It was fun. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
And thank you to everybody for listening and watching. And I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.